Rutherford Hayes, the 19th President of the United States, remains one of the most complex and intriguing figures in American history. Serving from 1877 to 1881, Hayes navigated a nation still reeling from the Civil War and the tumultuous Reconstruction era. Despite his relatively short term, his presidency had a profound impact on American politics, especially in areas such as civil service reform and the withdrawal of federal troops from the South, which signaled the end of Reconstruction. Today, historians examine Hayes's presidency as an era of compromise, reform, and a transition toward the modern political era. Rutherford B. Hayes was born on October 4, 1822, in Delaware, Ohio, to Rutherford Hayes Sr. and Sophia Burchard. His father passed away before he was born, and his mother, Sophia, took the responsibility of raising him and his siblings. Raised in a modest household, Hayes experienced firsthand the hardships that many Americans faced in the early 19th century. His mother was a woman of strong character and religious values who instilled in her children a deep sense of discipline, education, and hard work. Hayes attended Kenyon College in Ohio, where he developed a love for academics and a deep interest in literature and philosophy. After graduating in 1842, he pursued further studies at Harvard Law School, graduating in 1845. Hayes then returned to Ohio, where he established a law practice in Cincinnati. His legal career quickly gained a reputation for his integrity, dedication, and strong moral compass, traits that would define much of his later political career. Before entering politics, Hayes was involved in several social causes and public service initiatives. His legal career saw him work on several important cases, particularly those involving civil rights and social justice. He firmly believed in the rule of law and the importance of a government that served the people, and these principles would later guide his actions in public office. Hayes initially entered the political sphere through the Whig Party, which was prominent in Ohio during the early 1840s. His interest in public service was not driven by ambition, but by his belief in reform and his sense of duty to serve his country. He later switched allegiance to the Republican Party as it began to grow in prominence in the 1850s, primarily due to the party's firm stance against the expansion of slavery. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Rutherford B. Hayes, like many other young men, answered the call to serve his country. Despite having a law practice and political career ahead of him, Hayes enlisted in the Union Army, motivated by his unwavering commitment to the Union cause. He began his military service as a major in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry. Hayes's military service was marked by courage and strategic skill. He quickly earned a reputation for bravery in battle, particularly during the Battle of South Mountain and the Battle of Cedar Creek. His leadership was especially notable during the Battle of Cedar Creek, where his division played a critical role in securing a Union victory. Hayes was wounded several times throughout the war, and his bravery earned him a promotion to Brevet Major General by the war's conclusion in 1865. Despite the personal cost, Hayes's time in the military reinforced his commitment to preserving the Union and his belief that the federal government had a duty to ensure the rights and freedoms of all citizens, particularly formerly enslaved individuals. These views would shape much of his political philosophy in the post-war era. After the Civil War, Hayes returned to Ohio and resumed his political career, which included serving in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1865 to 1867. In Congress, Hayes was a committed advocate for civil rights and the abolition of slavery. He was particularly vocal in his support for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which sought to secure the rights of newly freed African Americans. In 1867, Hayes was elected as Governor of Ohio. He served 3 non-consecutive terms as governor from 1868 to 1872, and then again from 1876 to 1877. During his time in office, he gained a reputation for supporting progressive policies such as education reform, prison reform, and government transparency. Hayes was also a vocal advocate for the civil rights of African Americans, which aligned with his broader goal of achieving justice and equality in the post-war United States. Hayes also championed education throughout his political career, advocating for the establishment of public schools and for the fair treatment of African American students in the South. These efforts were part of his broader vision to rebuild the nation, not just physically but morally, after the ravages of war. The 1876 election remains one of the most contentious and controversial presidential elections in U.S. history. Hayes ran as the Republican candidate against Democrat Samuel J. Tilden, the governor of New York. Tilden won the popular vote by a narrow margin and appeared to have won the electoral votes necessary for victory. However, several southern states, Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina, had disputed results, leading to confusion and conflict about who had actually won the election. In response to this uncertainty, Congress created a special Electoral Commission to resolve the dispute. The commission, consisting of 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats, and 1 independent, ultimately voted in favor of Hayes, granting him the electoral votes from the contested states and thus the presidency. The decision, made on a strictly partisan basis, sparked outrage among Democrats who claimed that the election had been stolen. To end the standoff and ensure a peaceful transfer of power, a compromise was reached between the Republican and Democratic parties. In exchange for accepting Hayes's victory, Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South, effectively bringing an end to the Reconstruction era. This was a deeply significant moment in American history, as it marked the end of federal intervention in the South and allowed white Southern Democrats to regain control of their state governments. However, this compromise also led to the disenfranchisement of African Americans in the South and the beginning of the Jim Crow era. Rutherford B. Hayes assumed the presidency in March 1877, amidst intense political and social turmoil. He immediately faced the challenge of healing a divided nation, particularly the deep rift between the North and South that persisted after the Civil War. His first major action was to fulfill his part of the Compromise of 1877 by ordering the withdrawal of federal troops from the South. This action effectively ended Reconstruction and left African Americans in the South to fend for themselves in a region that was rapidly reverting to white-dominated political and social structures. He immediately faced the challenge of healing a divided nation, particularly the deep rift between the North and South that persisted after the Civil War. His first major action was to fulfill his part of the Compromise of 1877 by ordering the withdrawal of federal troops from the South. This action effectively ended Reconstruction and left African Americans in the South to fend for themselves in a region that was rapidly reverting to white-dominated political and social structures. While controversial, Hayes believed that the South would stabilize on its own and that the federal government could focus on promoting the welfare of all Americans rather than intervening in local matters. He hoped that the South would eventually uphold the civil rights of African Americans, but this proved to be an overly optimistic expectation, as segregation, disenfranchisement, and violence against African Americans would continue to worsen in the decades to come. One of Hayes's most significant achievements during his presidency was his commitment to civil service reform. He became a strong advocate for merit-based hiring in government positions and pushed for an end to the patronage system in which government jobs were handed out as political favors. Hayes believed that government employees should be chosen based on their qualifications, not political connections, and his efforts laid the foundation for the eventual passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act in 1883, after his term ended. This reform made it illegal to fire or demote government employees for political reasons and established a competitive examination system for hiring. Hayes also focused on economic issues during his presidency, particularly the monetary debate between the supporters of the gold standard and the advocates for the free coinage of silver. Hayes supported the gold standard as the way to ensure long-term economic stability, and his administration worked to reduce the national debt and restore confidence in the nation's currency. Rutherford B. Hayes did not seek re-election in 1880, and after serving one term, he retired to his home in Fremont, Ohio. After his presidency, Hayes became an advocate for educational reform and continued his work on behalf of civil rights. He supported efforts to improve the treatment of African Americans in the South and advocated for policies that would ensure their access to education and political participation. In his later years, Hayes also became involved in several philanthropic initiatives, including supporting the establishment of public libraries, hospitals, and universities. His legacy as a reformer and advocate for justice became increasingly recognized as the country entered the 20th century. Rutherford B. Hayes passed away on January 17, 1893, at the age of 70. Despite the controversies surrounding his presidency, his legacy endures as that of a president who worked tirelessly to reform and improve his country during a difficult and transitional period in American history. Rutherford B. Hayes's presidency is often overshadowed by the contentious 1876 election and the end of Reconstruction, but his tenure remains an important part of American history. His advocacy for civil service reform, his efforts to bring about economic stability, and his commitment to justice and equality have left a lasting mark on the nation. Although his presidency was brief and fraught with challenges, Hayes' actions and policies laid the groundwork for many of the reforms that would shape the modern United States. Through his leadership, Hayes demonstrated that even in times of great division, a commitment to integrity, fairness, and the greater good could guide the nation toward a more just and prosperous future. Please like and subscribe for more historical content.